is called The Thing That Should Not Be.
So, no. So, no. What happened?
Well, lyrically, it's, I wouldn't say it's a continuation of the Cthulhu thing, because it isn't really, but it's the same sort of subject as the Cthulhu. I'm not really as familiar with that as you might be.
Well,
in terms of the lyrical content, I can tell you about
the subject matter is of a great old godlike kind of being that generally does all harm and no good. Thus the title. I mean, if someone was to come across something like that, they would feel that it should not happen, should not be.
It's it's inspired by the original H.P. Lovecraft saga of the Cthulhu thing and all that. This is one of the spin-offs of where the inspiration came. Is one of the spin-offs from that mythology.
That's one of the titles given to that particular creature. So it's more a title of a being rather than a moralistic attitude of any kind, or a statement of some kind of opinion or anything. It's not like that at all. It's just something that's so bad that it.
Yeah, but the title is a thing that should not be.
The thing that we can write it down.
Okay. What, for instance, could you imagine as a thing?
Excuse me?
What, for instance, could you imagine as being the thing?
Well, I mean, in this case, it refers to a being, which is sort of ugly in many ways.
It's mythological.
Yeah. I mean, it's a story.
It's not a realistic. It's one of the few songs that are not realistic.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the first songs that we've written lyrically that's not, we're trying to bring in the real world or any of that kind. This is just sort of, and I think if the Cthulhu song on the last album would have had lyrics that would have been in the style of this, this is inspired by, a book, a book which is a novel, and it's, basically not anything too real. I think musically, that song is a bit different than the other ways, at least the way I look at it, is that it's the last song we've written on this album. The last song that was written was actually written here in the studio, most of it. And I think it's, at least from my point of view, I think it's, I wouldn't say it's a new direction. I wouldn't say it that way, but I think it's sort of showing that we can do things that from a musical point of view are quite simple, but works really well as an overall song, where it's the sort of song, as opposed to some of the other songs on the album, where you don't have to go through a lot of time changes. There's not a lot of what you would say from a musicianship point of view, brilliantness, and
it's not a real intricate kind of thing.
Yeah, it's very basic in the playing kind of thing, but the key thing here is that it just works that way. For instance, the drumming.
Maybe more rock and roll?
Well, I think the thing that makes a song like this one work is the overall feel. For instance, from where I'm playing the drums, I could do, a lot of, drum fills here and there, but this kind of song that really works well, we just keep it flowing and sort of really heavy and tight. Whereas I think something like some of the AC/DC songs where, from a musicianship point of view, there's not a lot in it, but it's just the feel of it that works. You take the real steady drumming of Phil Rudd, and it's not a lot of time change, a lot of musical, brilliantness, but it just sort of works from a feel point of view. And this, I think, is sort of that song, which could be, that style could be, developed even more in the last album, where it's like where you get, I look at it from at least the way I play drums in this song, where you get so confident in you get so much confidence in your playing that you don't have to show everyone that you can do more than you're actually doing, where less works more. And where this song, for instance, if you compare it to Disposable Heroes on the other side, there's a lot of playing, a lot of time changes, a lot of musical ability and so forth, but this is quite the opposite of it. It's a basic sort of, as you say, rock and roll thing that just really moves and grooves, that kind of thing,
Okay. So, the fourth track of the first
is
song
It's called, at the moment, and this is probably how it's going to stick, it's called Welcome Home, parentheses, Sanitarium, because if you just put Welcome Home, people wouldn't really understand it. It's a song about...
is that the ballad?
Yes, it's the ballad. It's basically about a person who is in a sanitarium, and he feels from his point of view that he is sane and shouldn't be there. He's locked up in this cage with all these other mentally sick people, and he feels that, it's a bit, I wouldn't say inspired, but it's a bit like the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest situation with Jack Nicholson, where he's hanging out in this sort of mental hospital, and he feels that, he's sane and shouldn't be there, and, escape and try and get away from it all and so forth. And, it's a ballad, whatever you want to call it. It's a song that, has a bit softer beginning and builds, kind of song that builds up, and so
as far as the reputation of Metallica has not been established by ballads, I would like to know what
ballad.
What is a ballad according to you?
Well, that's why I'm hesitant to use the word, because I don't really think that you have to categorize each song saying this is thrash, this is ballad. Because if you listen to the last 3 minutes of the song, it's not a ballad. So it just depends how you approach it. I prefer to not put things so much in categories. When's the last song of the first album?
Metallica ballad would more or less be a slower song that's maybe not as ultimately heavy as the other ones. Something a little. The guitar work is not as so that's
And in a way, Fade to Black from your last album could be considered as a ballad. So
it's about as close as
what is ballad according to you? That's why I
Fade to Black. Okay, Fade to Black is a ballad.
I think one of the reasons why Ride the Lightning worked so well was that you had 8 songs on there that were pretty much completely different from each other. And I think one of the reasons this album works, or hopefully will work, or at least from our point of view works, is that it's got that same sort of thing to it, where you have 8 songs that are fairly different from each other in feels and in sort of overall whatever. And I think if this song has, like an 11th cousin on Ride the Lightning, it's Fade to Black.
Okay. Plus, a Scorpion song, like you said, Still Loving You. That's a very true ballad in that sense, but a Metallica ballad would not what you would be called a true ballad. It's a mutation of the word ballad.
For me, I don't know. For me, I'd say that Beyond the Realms of Death, Judas Priest, I think that's a ballad. That's where that word fits in really well.
There's everything on this album that we do is basically for our pleasure. There's absolutely none. They have not. The record company says, give us 8 songs.
Yeah,
that's the extent of the pressure. That is it. We want 8 songs.
At one point there was talk about maybe only 7 songs, but they said since one of them was an instrumental that they would like to have 8 songs, period. And this whole thing with people that, thinking and making up these ideas, Metallica, wimp out, U.S. radio, big label. It's kind of funny because we, from being on the inside of all that shit, we know that, this is just as much Metallica as it's ever been, except, the only difference being that in the studio we don't have the pressure of having to be out of the studio at a given time financially, so we have a bit more time to explore ideas and production things, but there has been nothing, and people will probably find this hard to believe, there has been nothing, absolutely nothing from the record company about, well, you have to have a song, or you have to have a short song. None of these songs are under 5 minutes. Alright, period. There's not a song that has a 4 in front of it. So there's been nothing about having a short song or a mid-tempo song or a song, with a catchy harmony, chorus, cat, or whatever. There's been nothing, and part of that I think also has to do with our management. Really, first of all, have a very good understanding of what we are and what we do and the way we should sort of be managed. And they have the record company in America fairly, in a tight grip because, Cliff Bernstein is one of the most respected managers in America because of Def Leppard, biggest band and all this shit. And also he has Dokken on Elektra, which is the same label. So he has very good insight into the company, and they know, the record company, that when he says don't get involved with the songs or the recording or the production, then they know him enough to sort of say, all right, we won't.
And they respect his opinion.
They respect that. And, so this situation that all these people have thought would happen with Metallica and big label and all this, I mean...
So coming back to Masters of Puppet.
Master, no S.
Master of Puppet. As far as the first side of this record is concerned, and musically speaking, we can say that it's more heavier than Metallica used to do. Heavier.
You might say that
because Mike's talking about that.
You might say that because the sounds are better, because we've had more time to work on the sounds. Like, you say heavier, okay? You think the last album, and they started work on the drums, okay? And they did the drums, and they had so much time to do the drums. We had very little money, and there was a lot of pressure because there was little money and things had to get done. Okay, when you're under that kind of pressure, you have to make certain sacrifices. You get a sound, be it drums or guitar or whatever, and it's good. But if you spent another 2 days on it, maybe it could be a little better, which you would think is heavier.
It's not an aggression, see? It's just what I noticed. I think it's more heavier.
Right.
All the instruments are stronger.
We've had more time to make things stronger.
It's very. I think we've also, at least speaking for myself, what we did on this album was that we, before we started recording our own 8 songs, we did 2 cover songs, which should remain nameless. And basically what we did, the reason why we did those 2 cover songs was to, find out what sounds we were getting, how it...
on it, maybe it could be a little better, which you would think is heavier.
It's not an aggression, see? It's just what I noticed. I think it's more heavier.
Right.
All the instruments are stronger.
We've had more time to make things stronger.
It's very. I think we've also, at least speaking for myself, what we did on this album was that we, before we started recording our own 8 songs, we did 2 cover songs, which should remain nameless. And basically what we did, the reason why we did those 2 cover songs was to, find out what sounds we were getting, how it sounded, how we should play them. I think, at least for myself, I found out that in the recording of those 2 cover songs, how I should play the drums on the other songs, which is, I'm playing a lot more aggressively, even in the studio, which I think all of us are playing more aggressively, that we're so confident now in the studio. I mean, it's difficult when you're a musician and studios. Sometimes they can make you nervous. And, when you start out a recording studio, a couple of years ago, it was like, wow, you're nervous, and all this. And I think all of us have really sort of passed that now. And instead of thinking about, being in the studio, or we have to be done at a certain time, we can just be really relaxed and a lot more confident. And I think that shows in the playing. It's a lot more aggressive. I mean, we've learned to try and get the same aggressions and the same energy that we create on stage. I think we've learned how to create them in the studio, even though each of us are only playing by themselves, and there's not 3,000 people going crazy in front of you. And I think that feel shows too in the songs and the sounds. But I mean, how do you measure heaviness? Some people measure it in speed. Some people measure it in how you tune the guitar. It might be heavier.
Just about the sound.
Yeah, you see, that comes back to the point where we've had a lot more time here to work with sounds, which means we get better sounds, which in our case, better means heavier. Because we're a very heavy band.
And maybe because,
as you can just hear from all this, I'm not...
Maybe also because
putting things in categories. Second side, you have first track, which is Disposable Heroes, which was the first song that was written for this album. Basically, that and Battery were the first 2 songs. Long, 8.5 minutes. Lyrically, it's the same subject as Master of Puppets, which is some people ruling other people. In this case, it's about certain people, whether it be the government or military leaders or whatever, that could remain more nameless than the people that they rule, which is the soldiers, sort of out in battle, out in the fields, which are fighting for, what are we fighting for? But they're still being sort of told what to. You have to go kill these people, but the big question mark from the soldiers: why do I have to kill these people just because these people? Which is, it's kind of been done before, that sort of lyric thing. Yeah. But I mean, it's the lyrics are really good.
For instance,
it seems the world is making a lot of hoopla over that particular film.
I've heard that it's creating a lot of talk in France.
None of us have seen it or even care. I mean, it has nothing to do.
It's got nothing to do with Rambo. It was written before Rambo came out.
And none of us have even seen the film anyway. So.
No.
But this,
neither did I anyway.
This, as opposed to the thing that should not be musically, is I wouldn't say a typical Metallica song, but it's kind of Metallica song. Have a lot of time changes, a lot of different moods, a lot of different feels. Slow, fast, a lot of tempo changes, fast stuff like that. I think the playing on it, from the musicianship point of view, there's a lot of things, musical ability, as opposed to the other song where it's just kept more basic, and it works really well for this song. I don't know what else to say about it. It's we played it at Frankfurt at the Lorelei Festival with the bootleg. Went over quite well.
Exactly.
The reason we played it was basically the first song, and we were the most confident in playing that and so forth.
Okay.
Next song.
Next one.
Number 2 is Leper Messiah. Ooh, that's heavy. That's tempo-wise, it's sort of around sort of For Whom the Bell Tolls, sort of slow, heavy, pounding, crunchy guitars. Lyrically, it deals with this phenomenon in America, which I don't think has really been experienced yet in Europe, which is
television evangelism.
Yeah, television evangelism is probably one of the best words for it, or more basic, TV religion, and how, no offense to Americans, but a lot of people sort of, there's this guy pointing his finger at you in the television saying, send me money and you will meet God, and, it's very, very fake, at least as far as we're concerned. And me and James have a lot of fun every Sunday night at the house, sitting around watching this, having a good laugh. Different names in the sort of regular heavy metal producers, such as Chris Sangarides or Martin Birch. We thought if we were going to get a producer, it should maybe be someone a bit different. So
Ted Templeman, for instance.
Mutt Lang. No. So the first name that was kicked around was someone named Geddy Lee, who plays bass in Rush, and we're actually very keen on getting him, and he was very keen on working with. He's a very good friend of our management, and he came to our show in Toronto, and we got on with him really well and so forth. And basically what happened was there was a sort of conflict schedule, as they say in the business, which meant that he basically couldn't do it because of his commitments with Rush. And we thought that it just slowly started thinking about that it would be better maybe just to approach this ourselves anyway, like we did last time. And we came to the conclusion that we were very, very keen on working with Fleming, who, as you know, is here in Sweet Silence. But we wanted to record in L.A. So what we did was we invited Fleming to come over to L.A. for some time in July, and me and James went down and met him in L.A., and we sort of took a tour of the most happening studios in L.A. that the record company had set up. They set up, a tour of about, 20 studios, 20 of the sort of so-called name big, happening studios and all this shit, which, we took a week, and basically what happened was that there was one studio that we were interested in recording in, which we thought had, the good atmosphere we were looking for in the sort of rooms and facilities, but that was booked up until the middle of 1986, so scratch that. The other studios, in LA, most of them have a very, very business-oriented feel to them, a very sort of hit factory. Band comes in, makes their hit single with their drum machines and their keyboards and their Fairlights, and then leave, next week. The next band comes in, makes their next hit single, and very sort of office, very bad atmosphere, at least, as far as we were concerned. So basically what happened was that the decision was made to come back here simply because we couldn't get that studio in LA that we really wanted, which was a studio called Conway. And any of the other studios kind of didn't measure up to the studio in terms of facilities and also overall price, since $1 and all that shit. The rates that we get here at Sweet Silence are very, very good. About a third as much as the rates in LA, which means we could spend a little more time here and relax, and not relax in that sense, but not be under pressure, guys standing, with the calculator saying you have 3 days left, so forth money-wise. So the decision was made to come back here, and here we are. Yeah, I mean, how much that we learned in the year.
How much taking advantage.
When we came into the studio to record Ride the Lightning, and the difference between when we came into recording Ride the Lightning and now, I mean, it's like everyone really has learned a lot. And, with Fleming sort of, helping get our ideas across down onto tape and so forth, and getting the sounds that, that we're trying to get. Plus, we did the session at the record plant in, for the B-side of Creeping Death, where we also worked along with Mark Whitaker, which also sort of helped. It's basically like the more you're in the studio, the more you learn. And, so I mean, this is working really well. Battery, not that kind of battery. Battering ram, battery, aggression, sort of, like attacking. I don't know if it's just a very, I guess, English word. But basically that's opening song. I think it's about the ultimate, it's like Fight Fire was, at the time of Ride the Lightning, pretty much the ultimate thrash song in terms of playing and songwriting. I think Battery's like one step beyond that, sort of just a lot of energy and a lot of aggressions. But at the same time, there's like the odd melody thrown in on the guitar, and there's the vocal melody seems to be quite happening for that
in the
song.
States, the Police have a title for when they arrest someone for beating someone else up. They call it assault and battery.
Battery, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So that's also
battery.
Has something to do with
the word battering ram? You know what that means?
You can write it down. I would know that.
It just means, I don't know, something in the vicinity of hurting people.
Well, no, a battering ram is...
Yeah, battering ram is you have a bunch of people, a big...
like a big log or something.
Yeah, and you batter in a door. And you have, 3 or 4 people go into a door.
Battery is to pummel, to beat something into submission.
It's a song about a lot of getting aggressions out and sort of, I think it's also a bit connected to the music in the sense that it's sort of also what happens on stage. We just get a lot of aggressions and sort of push it all out, as much as you can.
Also, like, back home, if you go and see a heavy metal show, a good thrash band or something, or maybe even a good punk band or whatever, there's that kind of a situation set up to see when you read the lyrics that, you get people, people on stage creating this sound, creating this energy, and the audience taking that and producing this kind of whirlwind on the floor, which is kind of like a battery, just people just flailing around, throwing their bodies into the air, and generally, doing as much harm to each other.
Sing along?
I know.
We're never really too big on sing along.
No. But I think it's about the perfect opener. Plus, I think it's probably about the ultimate and sort of whatever you want to call it, thrash or speed, because I think it's got sort of all the ingredients that you want to put into a song like that, and also sort of the playing on it's really well. Just on side one is Master of Puppets, Master of Puppets, which is the title track, and which is the first song that has an 8 in front of it, which which means that we're up around 8.5 minutes or something like that. Lyric-wise, it's a song about, master of puppets. You know what that means? Puppets. Masters, the guy who, it's basically, there are 2 songs on the album that tie into that subject, which, is the title of the album, and also sort of that subject, which is Master of Puppets and Disposable Heroes. Which, you break it down, it's just basically how about people or a thing run other people, rule other people. Everyone thinks they're so free and all this shit, but basically how about a few people run a whole bunch of other people and sort of tell them, just sort of operate the fucking.
It's a song about some kind of.
And basically, the master in this song, in the song "Master of Puppets," is drugs, and whether you want it to be an anti-statement or, I don't think. It's not really a huge statement behind it saying, it's against drugs or for drugs. This is a song about someone being addicted.
What happens?
It's someone being run by drugs, basically, and how the drugs, rule and run this person, and how the drugs are basically this person's master.
It's just a comment on the kind of things that happen to people. Okay, I mean, certain people can take drugs and they can control what they take. Other people become controlled by what they take. Okay, this is a comment on the kind of people that become controlled rather than control.
Okay.
It's not a yes or no thing.
Well, I think that one of the things that we've really succeeded on, I think, on these songs, doing really well, is that the songs are. Like I told, there's about 27 minutes a side. You have 4 songs on each side, which means that, as you can understand, the songs are quite long. Master of Puppets is, there are 3 or 4 songs on this album that are like 8 minutes long. But I think what we've succeeded on doing, and especially because of the way that we approach the songs when we write them and arrange them, is that you have songs that it doesn't matter what the number says on how long the song is, whether it says 6 minutes or 8 minutes, how long it. If the song flows when you listen to it, it could be 6 minutes or 12 minutes. I don't think that matters. I mean, these are just numbers that printed on record sleeve. But I think that we've succeeded on writing songs that sort of work through the whole song, and where there's not really a point where you say, "Gee, this seems a bit long," or "Gee, now they're repeating that again," or whatever. I think that also there are some bands that write, say, an 8-minute song, where you have 27 different things that happen over 8 minutes. Or they do a riff, then another riff, then another riff, then another riff, and just keep on going, and you can't understand anything that's going on or remember any of it. I think in the long songs that we do, and I think one of the reasons they work is because we sort of keep going back to, we never sort of forget what's been before, in terms of that we have a tendency, especially towards the end of the song, to go back to sort of where we came from. So the song works as a whole. And try and put, for instance, Master of Puppets has, a part in the middle that sort of, then it slows down and sort of, builds up, and there's a lot of different moods it goes through. And I think, a lot of these songs really work well that way. I think we'd have a lot of problems if we had songs that were that long that didn't work.
Yeah.
But I think we've sort of managed. And it's interesting, too, because on the last album, when we came in the studio, a lot of the songs were a lot longer than they actually are on the album. There was a lot of cuts made in the song where we said, well, let's take this part out. But on this album, so far there's not been one cut made, taking, a verse out or taking, a bridge out or anything. All the songs are as long now as they were when we wrote them, which, is even more, proves that they sort of work. We've listened to these songs every day for 4 months, and there's still not passages where we say this seems to be a bit too long or whatever.